Hey everyone, Paul Ficheski here, and welcome to Nebraska Landlord's YouTube channel, where my mission is simple, and that's to enhance the landlord-tenant relationship. So in this video, this may be the most important video I've ever done, most important training that I've ever done. So please make sure you watch this to the end, because there is a lot of valuable information you have to know about. So I think many of you know that the city of Omaha sprang on us Omaha's Housing Affordability Action Plan. I got it right here. It's 35 pages, very comprehensive, very, very regulatory heavy. And it is designed to, as they say, tackle Omaha's housing affordability and housing accessibility crisis that they say that we have. And I'm not going to deny that there are some issues, but they make it sound like it's extremely, at a hazardous level. I'll leave that for you to decide. But in the event, they have a plan that they launched late October. It's already made it through 3 readings at the city council. And the city council was going to vote on implementing this or make it part of the ordinance last Tuesday. But what happened is only one side of the housing industry was notified about this. And I'll explain that in a minute. But there were people, influential people, that are going to be impacted by this plan that basically went to members of the city council and said, hey, listen, we didn't even know about this. This is going to impact us. We haven't had time to read it. We don't know how it's going to impact us. We want to have our input. And so the city council, they postponed voting on this plan to codify it till next Tuesday. So they basically postponed the vote by a week. Now, this plan is going to pass, and there are a couple of reasons why I believe that. Number one is Omaha, over the last several years, has accepted a lot, millions of dollars, in fact, of federal money, particularly from HUD and the EPA, regarding housing issues. And anytime you receive money from the government, there's always a catch. And one of the things that the requirement typically has is they have to use the ordinance process to basically enforce regulations, implement regulations, etc. Number 2, LB 866. So the legislature and the governor did this to us. It's called the Municipal Density and Missing Middle Housing Act. This was passed to deal with, specifically in Omaha, the availability and the housing shortage. Okay, and one of the remedies to all the availability issues and the affordability issues seems to be density. Make housing more dense, build up, not wide. And it required Omaha to develop a plan to deal with that. And then the third thing is, you and I voted in November to make the city do this. So there was a ballot initiative on the ballot in November and it was a proposal to amend the Omaha charter. And basically the voters were requiring, if passed, and it did pass, that the city aggressively tackle the housing availability issue and the housing affordability issue. So we actually gave them the green light to do this, and they did exactly what we asked them to do. Now, I do want to come back to the stockholders in this. So this plan, by the way, I'm going to make this plan available to you. I'm going to leave a link down in the video description. I highly encourage you to download it, read it, and find out what's about to happen to you, because this is going to be a huge impact on your business and how you do business. So this plan goes way out of its way to make it sound like, when you read it, that the city of Omaha overwhelmingly wants these things. What they don't really tell you is the people that they went to. Remember, under this plan, they had open houses and they had surveys that were done, etc. But they really didn't publicize it to the general public. They publicized it to their allies in this plan. They went to the nonprofit industry, like the Family Housing Advisory Service, the OTOC, Together One, etc. And those groups went out to their sphere of influences and said, hey, we need you to show up to these open houses. We need you to email the planning department. And basically, all this information came from, or I guess the approval of this plan came from the housing nonprofit side of things, which typically is very tenant friendly. The reason they postponed the vote was because the other side of the housing, the landlords, the managers, the builders, the developers, the lenders, because this impacts lenders as well, they didn't know about it. And that's why it got postponed. But key is, when you read this, it makes it sound like that everyone in the city of Omaha supports what this plan has to offer. A lot misleading. All right, so what I want to do now is focus on this plan's objectives and goals. So what does the plan focus on, and what are their objective and goals? And let me just reiterate here. This impacts a huge segment of real estate. Builders, developers, the lenders, landlords, and managers. I'm only focusing in on the landlords and the manager side of things. So as it relates to us, the plan specifically, quote unquote, is designed to deal with the predatory landlord. I'm going to come back to that. Number 2, deal with the loss of unsubsidized housing to redevelopment. That has been an issue where you have an old housing project that is torn down, and then a private developer comes in and puts a mall there, okay? Or they put another multifamily unit there, but it's not Section 8 approved, it's open market, etc. Number 3, deal with the out-of-town investors. I actually agree with that. I did a previous video on that. I've been very outspoken about these companies like BlackRock that are spending billions of dollars in Omaha to buy up single-family homes and throw renters in there, but the renters have no one to call for maintenance. They have no one to call to serve notices, and it's not right. The tenants are being treated like crap. This needs to be dealt with. Sidebar. Number 5, create better incentives for affordable housing. Typically, that's it's legal bribery for developers and those folks to come on board with these plans. And number six, expand tenant assistance programs. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So that is the focus of the plan. Now, here are the specific goals and objective of the plan and how it impacts us. Number 1, create and implement an affordable housing fee. Now, in the plan, it goes on to describe what that is. And it basically says that if a builder developer does not build let's say a multi-unit or a single family home under the guidelines established in this plan or future, ordinances and zoning rules, basically it does not comply with the Housing Affordability Action Plan criteria, then they have to pay a hefty fee. And we know that that hefty fee is going to be passed on to the purchaser. But what we've seen in other jurisdictions, other towns, that this plan has been, I guess, basically cut and pasted from, is after the plan was implemented, they went ahead and then added to the plan to include all the green stuff. And in many jurisdictions on the East Coast, under their version of the housing availability plan, is it required landlords to, if you own a 1920, let's say, house, a house that was built in 1920, that you have to make it green. And if you don't, then there is a reoccurring fine on an annual basis, and it's hefty that you have to pay until you make your property green to comply with, make all the environmental stuff. The point is, under the plan, it only focuses on the development side. However, this plan was based on other cities' housing plans, and they've already upgraded their plan to include the green stuff that specifically targeted the landlording community. So it's only a stepping stone. Number 2, to make the rental property inspection ordinance that we currently have much broader, more comprehensive, and much stricter. And they did mention things like having housing inspections every 2 years, not sampling. So that would mean they're going to have to hire a buttload more inspectors, which would grow the bureaucracy. Make punishments, if landlords aren't in compliance, a lot more strict, etc. Number 3, free tenant legal representation. Basically, the tenant's right to counsel at evictions. Now, I also want to expand on this, because what we have seen in other jurisdictions that started with these type of plans that Omaha has outlined, and then they built upon them, is number 1 is the first thing that would be implemented is the tenant has a right, if they're being evicted, to legal counsel. Now, they would free representation. Now, that would either be done by the public defender's office, maybe the city legal department would create their own tenant, legal department. I don't know how they're going to specifically structure that, but the tenant would be entitled to free and absolute legal representation paid for by the taxpayers. But make no mistake about it, in all the jurisdictions that have tenant representation, the landlord always pays a reoccurring fee per door, $50, $75, $100 per year per door to fund these programs. All right, so that's going to be an additional cost on this community. The other thing that we know is in jurisdictions that have tenants, right to legal representation, evictions that normally were taking 30, 45 days are now taking 4 to 6 months. The other thing that this plan hints to and refers to, and I think they intentionally made it very vague, is to implement other programs to enhance that tenant stay, things such as mediation and arbitration. And once that's implemented, then what we find in those communities that have both is the tenant typically has about 9 months before they can be evicted. So what happens is the tenant doesn't pay the rent, then they're forced, the tenant and landlord are forced to go to mediation. And they have 30 days to do that. And if they can't come to an agreement under mediation, it goes to arbitration. And then they have 60 days to do that. And if they can't get a resolution there, then it goes to full-blown court, eviction court, and then the tenant is entitled to legal counsel, and then they use all the processes to, postpone it through continuances and stuff like that. The goal here is to get all of that. So what would happen is a normal eviction for non-payment of rent could take up to 9 months before that tenant can get thrown out. That is what this is aiming at, all right? So you have to keep that in mind. Number 4, the source of income as a protected class. And what would happen is under Omaha's fair housing law, the source of income would be a protected class. This is like the holy grail of all the tenant nonprofit groups. Essentially what that would mean is you would have to accept as a landlord or manager Section 8 housing vouchers, Douglas County vouchers. This could also extend to private sector vouchers, such as, there's been a lot of talk about nonprofits getting federal grant money for voucher services as well. Programs like the Lutheran Family Services, they have their own type of program. Landlords and managers would have to accept all of those types of voucher programs. And then last but not least, number 5, rent control. I want to talk about rent control because the plan does talk a lot about rent controls. And when you read the plan, what you're going to find out is they made it sound like the entire community of Omaha wants rent control. Now remember, it was only a small segment of the community that actually participated in the surveys and the feedback and all of that, which was the tenant housing nonprofit sector. Of course, they want rent controls. Rent controls come in many, many different forms and fashions. It doesn't even go into detail. But the thing I want you to know, this is the basis, the foundation for eventual implementation of rent control. Because the study says, yes, the community wants it. And then number 2, it kind of goes on to say that even though the community wants it, we're holding off a little bit because there are some negative connotations when it comes to rent control. Rent control has been linked with housing dilapidation, and we want to make sure that we do it right. So they're not saying that they're not going to do it. They're not saying they are going to do it. What they're saying is we need to look in this a little bit further so we can develop a framework that we think is going to work. So rent control is coming if this passes. And if they can get this housing plan passed, then all the other subsequent ordinances and rules and regulations can be implemented rather easy, because then the city council members can say, hey, we have to. We voted on this and we passed this plan 6 months ago. This is part of it. And so it's easy peasy. And then the politicians have the fallback. They can fall back and say, hey, I had to do this. This was required. We already agreed with it. The plan says the entire community of Omaha is for it, etc. You know how all of this works. Now, All right, now before you go, hear me out here, very important. I'm going to leave the link down below in the video description of all the city council members and the mayor. If you want to opine on your opinion on this, please do so. That is your right to do. Secondly, I will keep you updated as this plan gets passed, gets implemented, and then the subsequent follow-up, things that they're going to do, I'll make sure that you know about it. But I want you to understand something here. If this passes, your business as you know it is gone. It's done. It's going to be changed forever. The amount of regulation that is in here and how it's going to impact you, your current business models are not going to be able to sustain the additional cost. And it's going to be time for you to start thinking about, do I sell? Do I restructure? Do I change my business model? You're going to have to really sit down and think about, is this model sustainable for the extra cost that it's going to require, especially rent control, depending on how it's going to be established here in Omaha. These are things, though, that you need to start thinking about now. So Tuesday, the city council is going to vote on this. Make sure you make your opinion known ahead of time. If it passes, I'll let you know. And then at that point, you need to really, really sit down and look at your model and decide how you want to proceed, because it's going to be a lot of extra money for you to operate. And most of you are not going to be able to operate in a profitable way. And how do I know this? I've looked at several other communities around the country, particularly on the East Coast, that have implemented these types of programs. And what's happened is the existing landlording community just gets decimated. And then people come in and buy those properties that have a different, more flexible business model, a lot more cash flow. The margins are different, a lot more money being put on, so the margins are a lot greater. They come in and they're able to sustain. We see at that point a huge influx of corporate and government-owned landlording. Cities actually buying properties, and they're city-owned apartment communities. Nonprofits come in, corporations like BlackRock. The point is, these are detrimental to the health. These plans are detrimental to the health of the ordinary landlord as we know it. All right, everybody. Sorry for the doom and gloom, but I just wanted to make you aware. I'll see you in the next video.